Hi, everybody. Hi, everybody. Welcome to this week's edition of Daily Kos The Brief. It's our weekly show about politics. I'm Marcos Molitzis. I'm here with Carrie Eleveld, and today we are going to be talking about abortion, how the debate is shaping up, and what it means for the 2022 election. Our guest our guest in 15 minutes will be Christina Reynolds. I've got a little bit of allergies, maybe a cold, but our guest today will be Christina Reynolds. She is VP of Communications at Emily's List. Emily's List is an organization that recruits and supports pro-choice women running for office. Emily's List, NARAL, and Planned Parenthood have announced a $150 million program to center abortion rights in this November's election. So we'll be talking about that and how that debate is shaping up, because, Carrie, they made that announcement before the draft leak.
That's right. That's right. I remember you dropping it in the channel, and I thought, well, that's interesting. And then the draft leak happens, and I'm like, whoa. I mean, whoa. So they were already planning a huge investment, which obviously we will be asking Christina about.
Yeah, I mean, they knew that Roe was going to get axed in June, right? But did they foresee this kind of fury, this response that we're seeing? It's really energizing the progressive base in a way that I hope portends good things for November. As people realize this is it. We are in the minority. We're back to being the resistance in some ways. And the reason that the party in power loses midterm elections is because there's a sense of complacency and, oh, we won, and now we got what we wanted, and throw in some sort of disgust at not getting everything that was promised, because everybody promises things they cannot deliver. I get the feeling now. The feeling is, yeah, you know what? We're still in the minority because that Supreme Court was stolen. It's illegitimate. Mm-hmm. It is trampling on our cherished rights. And what can we do about it? And that's, I think, what this debate's going to be. Right now, people are angry. There's going to have to be a shift. And Carrie, you've been covering this abortion rights issue. I was going to say religiously, but just like single focus
since it happened. I mean, I don't want to take anything away from the reproductive rights journalists who have been covering this year in and year out. But to your point, since this news dropped last Tuesday, I've been studying everything that's been happening, trying to figure out, everything from how are Democrats going to use this? Are they going to use it? Where's the White House? Where's the Senate? Where are House Democrats? What's the electorate think? How does it feel about what happened? Are we seeing any notes of changes in terms of this sort of resetting the table a little bit on what might be prioritized by voters in November? I mean, there's just a whole slew of things happening. So I've been really paying attention to that. And just to give you a little bit of insight, because we do have a little bit of polling to work with, right? But a little bit of insight into what a jolt this is to the electorate. CBS News, YouGov, released a poll on Monday, I think, and it was taken the 3 days following the news that this draft leak was, that was going to destroy Roe, overturn it. And, it's no surprise that they found I can't remember, they found 60% or something, 65% of people don't think Roe should be overturned. That wasn't a surprise, but fully 50% of Roe supporters said they were surprised. So, right. So this is a shock to 50% of Roe supporters. They did not see it coming. And some people, people who spend their whole lives doing politics are like, how can you not see this coming? But, there's other people have different lives. They don't spend all their time thinking about the Supreme Court and what it's going to do. They just kind of considered this settled law. So that's a shock. Now, on top of that, and I thought this was really interesting, among those who wanted Roe left in place, Roe v. Wade, 70% said they felt discouraged. 68% said they felt angry. 61% said they were scared, and 50%, as I said they felt surprised. So that is people just kind of coming to grips with, oh my God, this is really happening. And I think we're starting to see that in other places too. We don't know yet where this is going, exactly how this is going to influence the election. But I tell you what, it is, I think on a personal level, people are trying to figure out, what does this mean for me? What does this mean for my family? If I have kids, if I have daughters, what does it mean for them? And then there's people like me. I got married to my wife in 2017. Like, what does it mean for us? Frankly, I'd been thinking about this purely in terms of abortion. And a good friend of mine said to me, well, it's been nice being married to my partner for the last several years. And I was like,
it's important to
right.
note, to reiterate, we talked about this decision last week's episode, and we talked to Christine Pelosi about it. And she really sort of spoke about the anger of the moment, right? She wasn't quite ready to talk about the political impact. And I think most people are not. So it's easy to forget that the draft opinion just came out 8 days ago. I mean, it feels like a lifetime, right? But no, it's 8 days ago. And so the machinery is just sort of moving into place, and people are realizing, and there might have even been, for people who are sort of just tangentially aware of politics, it might have even been like the boy who cried wolf. Oh, you always tell us that Republicans want to destroy choice, and we could say like they literally are. They're chipping away at the rights. They haven't banned it, but they've chipped away. But they're like, no, you keep saying that they're going to ban abortion, and they've never done it. And now suddenly it's like, wait, what? And so that's going to take a little bit of time to seep into the, how people feel about the coming election. And a lot of it will depend on how leaders step up to the plate and channel that rage and that anger and that sorrow that you just talked about, for sure. So we're on sort of the beginning. We're on the precipice of something major. Something's happening here. I can sense it, and like I said, it feels like shit. We're on under assault again. And so it's important to know what you just said, Carrie, that this is not just about abortion, and I don't want to minimize that part, because this is massive. But Alito's draft opinion directly took aim at gay rights. It directly assaulted the underpinnings of decisions on interracial marriage and contraception. And he literally said that it wasn't the right because it wasn't the right when the founding fathers wrote the Constitution. And really, the only people that had rights back then were white male property owners. That's not a lot of us. So there is a lot at stake, and there's a very good chance that the final decision may water down some of those passages. But now we know what they want to do, because they have
rank impulses of Justice Samuel Alito and the 5 votes who voted to overturn. Yeah.
So now they may want to hide that agenda, that broader agenda. Don't mention gay marriage and anti-sodomy laws. Don't mention that, because we'll do that more quietly.
Right.
But now we know the gig is up. We've seen it, and this is, to me, the conservative blueprint for what they want America to look like.
Absolutely. What they want America to look like is minority rule. That's exactly what they want America to look like. So, I think it's worth. So before we have, I know we're going to bring Christina in soon, and she's going to, really read us in on what they're thinking and what they plan to do and what they're seeing in their polling, et cetera. But I think it's worth thinking about, okay, so we don't know exactly where the electorate's going to fall yet. But part of that is, as you said, how the party channels the energy, right? How the Democratic Party channels the energy. And so I've been looking for signs about how the Democratic Party is going to channel that energy. And I'm giving Democrats right now a C, which is not failing, but not great. And the branches aren't completely equal either. So I just want to give a sense. I think from what I've read and what I've seen and lots of different stuff, right? This is what I do for a living, is try to figure out what the heck are they thinking in the hallowed halls there. So House Democrats seem at pains to figure out how to deal with this. They seem very much sort of, they know it's a big deal. I think they're starting to work up to something. You heard Christine Pelosi last week, and we can't, it's Christine Pelosi, but you got to know that she knows what the speaker's thinking is, right? And she said, I asked her if Democrats were ready for this, and she said, I think the Democratic base is ready for this. I think the American public was ready for this. And I think Democrats will rise to the moment. Okay. And that to me was a serious signal that she thought this really needed to be ground up, and that it wasn't like House Democrats were raring to get going on this. I think they're still really focused on pocketbook issues and don't want to get too far away from that. Over in the Senate, it is clear to me that Senate Democrats realize what a big fucking deal this is, and that people are pissed off, and they're going to channel that energy. And part of it is that several of those Democrats ran for president, and they now have big bullhorns, big platforms, and they're using it to make themselves felt. And I think of Elizabeth Warren. I think of Kirsten Gillibrand. I think of Amy Klobuchar. I mean, so we're going to play Kirsten Gillibrand in a second, because she gave a very fiery speech that gives you a sense of how Senate Democrats are handling this. Chuck Schumer has scheduled a vote on codifying Roe into law. I think it's supposed to happen tomorrow.
So since the podcast posts on Wednesday, so it'll be today if you're listening, tomorrow if you're watching.
Yes, sorry. So Wednesday, right? Let me be specific. But the point is that to get everybody on the record, do you support Roe or don't you? Right? You have to vote. Let's get you on record. So there's that, right? The Amy Klobuchar, I want to give her some credit. She's on the Sunday shows, and she says, this is a question about whether this is a decision that should be made between you and your doctor, or Ted Cruz. Is Ted Cruz going to be deciding your healthcare decisions? And I was thinking, way to pull out the most loathsome character in Congress and have millions of American women, their head just blowing up, thinking of Ted Cruz deciding what their, healthcare decisions were going to be. Because I was like, ew, Ted Cruz, are you kidding me? Like the worst of the worst. So let's give her some credit. But then there's Senator Gillibrand, and she gave a fiery speech. And I just want to give, this is going to take a minute, but I just want to give our listeners a sense of how she was channeling that energy. Walter, can we bring that in?
I would like to speak to America's men for 1 minute. Imagine you do not have authority over your own body for 10 months. Imagine if that decision-making would not be taken away, even if you would die in childbirth, even if you couldn't decide who you were having children with, even if you couldn't decide when you were having that child. I don't think a man in America could actually imagine not having control of his body, his bodily functions, what happens to him, and what life would be like for 10 months. It is an outrage that we have 5 justices on the Supreme Court who lied in their confirmation hearings in order to be confirmed.
Yeah. All I can say to that is amen, right?
Yeah, she's right. I can't even imagine it.
Yeah, I tell you, I mean, I haven't been pregnant. My wife has. And the level of vulnerability that you feel when you are pregnant is just off the charts. And the idea that you wouldn't be able to make decisions about how to work with that pregnancy, what you're going to do about it, life-altering decisions about not only having the child, but if there's some horrific abnormality, like if that could endanger your life, etc. I mean, I just can't even imagine. But that's how extreme the Republican Party is. They don't want people to be able to make their own decisions. They want to be dictating in your bedroom, in your life, what you're going to be doing with your own body, your own healthcare. Now, let's move on just a second to the White House. I think the White House is still grappling with what do we do with this. And in fairness to the White House, the decision hasn't dropped yet. right? What we have is a leaked draft that has been verified as a leaked draft. And, you know, I think it's hard for a president to come out and like give a full-throated speech on something that hasn't actually come to fruition yet in terms of another branch of government, right? But they have signaled that they're going to be ready, that they're talking about it. And what I would like to see is I want them to be ready on the day that happens. And we talked to Brian. Brian Fallon at one point, and he said, look, there's a long history of presidents going after rogue, you know, fringe Supreme Courts. And I hope that Joe Biden is ready to feel the empathy that we know he is capable of for exactly what Kirsten Gillibrand was talking about. But today, right now, they want to talk about pocketbook issues. They want to talk about economics, and I'll give the White House credit for this. What they did today, that he had a speech today, which is Tuesday. He had a speech where he went through his economic agenda and compared it to the 11-point plan that Rick Scott put out, who is the chair of the Senate GOP campaign arm, right? That was an 11-point plan that was going to would raise taxes on around 100 million Americans, mostly of people who can't afford it, working class, middle class Americans, and also sunset measures like Medicare and Social Security and whatever. I mean, it's just like, they
put this on paper.
They put it on paper. This is just, I mean, it is just draconian. And I think that like, reporters in Washington haven't been taking it like super seriously because they're like, well, it's not Mitch McConnell that did it. It's, you know, the Senate GOP campaign chief, you know, like he's got no power. But like McConnell hasn't put anything out. So you know what? This is the fucking de facto GOP plan. Sorry, I'm a little fired up here. And yeah, sorry.
Yeah. So our guest is here. So let's get her on. Our guest today is.
Oh no.
Christina.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to roll this. All
right. It's 10 seconds. Let's do it.
Let's do it. Let's hit Joe Biden today. He's asked about abortion at this economic speech that he gives, and I just wish he'd been a little bit more forward on it.
Do you drop Trump's China tariffs?
Do you support any restrictions on abortion, or what limits do you believe there should be as the Senate?
Because I want the story to be about inflation.
Actually, Carrie, let's use that as a good lead-in to bring on our guest. She is Christina Reynolds. She is the VP of Communications at Emily's List. Early money is like yeast. It makes a dough rise. Emily's List promotes women pro-choice candidates, recruits them, supports them, does amazing work. One of my favorite organizations. Christina, thank you so much for joining us.
I'm thrilled to be with you, although, Carrie, that Ted Cruz line has really thrown me. So I'm not emotionally prepared here, but I am thrilled to be with you and ready to get in here and I am as fired up as Carrie was a second ago. So ready to get into it.
All right, great. Well, listen, let's start with this $150 million investment that you guys have pledged to make. And what Marcos and I noted at the beginning was you guys released, or at least the first report I had seen on it came out just several days before the leaked draft opinion dropped, right? So you guys were already,
It was the same day. I think last week was like a year, right? Yes, we were, I will tell you not to speak too much about our internal plottings and whatnot, but
no, speak too much about it.
Speak too much about it. Got it. We have known for a while that this was going to be an issue that mattered in the election. We know very clearly where voters are on this. And contrary to what I would argue some of the media tends to, the way they tend to treat the issue, and contrary to the way the Republicans govern, voters are very clear. They are with us on this, and voters are very clear that they support Roe. They support the legal right to an abortion, and they do not like to see their rights taken away. And so we knew this would be an issue in the election. To be quite honest, we thought that we were going to face a challenge of a few months having to convince voters that this right was truly at risk. And the Supreme Court, in that leaked memo, just did that job for us. And it is the ramifications and the policy ramifications are tragic. They are devastating. And listen, I am so grateful for all of our allies who work in this space, to, the abortion funds and all of the groups that are working to get the people who need abortions, to get them that care. My work is electoral, and so we are in it to say, okay, you're going to pay for taking away our rights, right? We're going to replace you with people who will protect our rights, who will ensure that Ted Cruz doesn't, I'm going to use that from here on out, that Ted Cruz doesn't make those decisions, that government is not taking away our freedom to decide our future, our family, our healthcare, any of those things. It's really very simple. And we're in the right place, and we're in the place, the place where voters are. And so we knew this was going to be an issue. We've been working together. That I should say that 150 million is not just us. That is NARAL and Planned Parenthood as well, Action Fund as well. And we announced that we were going to be doing this, and that will come in a number of forms, right? Public education campaigns, talking to voters about what this is, helping train, candidates at all levels, because, and I know you all talk about this a lot, all of the levels matter, right? We've never seen, it's been a while since we've had such a clear example of why your state legislature matters, right? Why your attorneys, why the attorneys general matter, why it matters who's in the governor's office, and so on and so forth. And so we are focused on all of those levels. How do we get our candidates ready to respond? How do we get out there and make sure that people know what's happening? And so we had prepared that, we had announced it, and then surprise, the Supreme Court, we had this announcement that was, as you know, later confirmed by John Roberts, that it was in fact a draft opinion. And again, it's devastating news, but it puts some clarity on what we have to do here, right? And I think and hope that it puts some clarity for voters on who's on their side and who's not. And we've seen Republicans back that up, right? They are going even further than we thought they would. Mitch McConnell acknowledged that a national abortion ban is possible if they take control of Congress. We've seen in state legislatures and federal candidates offer more and more extreme positions. And we're going to highlight that for voters. We're going to make sure that doesn't stay under the radar, but that they have to answer for those positions.
So you say $150 million was, you thought you would have to spend some of that money, spending a couple of months, convincing people that this was something that actually, that was something to worry about.
Sure.
What we've seen with one, we've gained a month in general, but it's hit like a sledgehammer.
Yes.
To the point where early, I think you hadn't gone into the green room yet, but I talked about how it almost feels like 2017, when we were in the minority and we were the resistance. And so it's energizing, right? Being the one whose rights are being taken away, who's under assault, is energizing. And in a midterm election where base energy is the whole game, is there any sense that, okay, well, maybe we're not going to need to spend some money on convincing people this matters, and maybe we might even have more resources to throw at this thing because people are fired up?
I think it's still early. Although it feels like a year, it has only been a week. So we're, I think we'll see. I will say this. I think there's a lot going on in the world. And while the three of us and all the people that we work with are focused on this sort of thing every day, a lot of voters aren't. Right. And so we want to make sure that a couple things happen there. And I think this will still require a big investment. We want to make sure that this issue doesn't leave the headlines and then leave people's minds, right? That it is still top of mind, even in the face of, and when I say top of mind, look, there's a lot of things that are top of mind. My boss, LaFonza Butler, likes to say voters vote with their whole selves. So we're not saying this is going to be the only issue people vote on. We're not saying it's going to be the only point of concern, but we are saying it is going to be a driver of vote, and it's going to be a driver of that base that you were talking about, Marcos. And but I think we need to make sure that they know that, and we need to make sure that people understand where Republicans truly stand. Because the interesting thing, McConnell said the quiet part out loud this week, but last week in the leak, what I noticed was every Democrat coming out and saying this is wrong, here's what we should do, so on and so forth. And every Republican talking about either running the other way or talking about the egregiousness of the leak, right? And the sanctity of the Supreme Court opinions and, being private and all of that. And
we would be celebrating if the decision was in our favor.
That's
that
correct.
tells you right there
That's
that they know there's danger.
They know they're on the wrong side for sure. And so what we are going to make sure that people know is where they've stood, how they've gotten us here, how they have followed their party to all of the extreme lengths, and what's going to happen if they take charge. So I think that's still going to, I'm sure, our development people and all of them wish that it would, be an easier fight. But I think that will still require some work, and we're here to do it because we know it matters.
I think you're going to, I personally, so I was like deeply involved in covering the marriage equality movement, the LGBTQ movement from around 2005, 2006 to around 2015. Right. And I think there's going to be a lot of earned media that you guys are going to get help in terms of, you said, keeping this in the headlines, keeping it on voters' radar. Right. That once this happens, there's going to be all this reporting about how this affects individual people. It's one thing the media is really good at. They're terrible at political and prognosticating and analysis and stuff like that, but they're good at human interest stories. So I hope what we're going to see is a lot of good stories. Well, they're going to be heartbreaking stories about people being prosecuted, people being, people potentially, losing their lives because of this, or being forced to carry, stillbirth children to term and things like that. There's going to be heart-wrenching stories. Then there's going to be all of these legal appeals that are going to happen. I wonder if you're focused, when you say keeping it in the headlines, how you plan to go about doing that. I think you're going to have some help, and I'm wondering how you plan to sort of augment that proposition.
Well, I think one of the things that we like to do from Emily's list is talk about the success stories and where electing the Democratic pro-choice women matters, right? Where it can make a difference. And we've seen, in recent days, for example, Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel, who announced that she would not prosecute if this is overturned and Michigan is stuck with the law that is currently on the books. We've seen New York Attorney General Tish James talk about wanting to create a safe haven for and a fund for people who have to travel to get abortions, and so that New York can be a place where they can go if they need to. We want to keep highlighting those why it matters that your elected officials matter too, right? Again, grateful for the work of all the providers and all the people who are working to ensure that people who need this care can get it. But I think our point is we can also make changes electorally. And however many bad votes are happening right now, there are some good votes. There are places like Colorado where a Democratic governor signed, and New Mexico where Democratic governors have signed what Democratic legislatures passed. And each of those elections matter. In North Carolina, where I am right now, we have a Democratic governor, but a Republican legislature, but we broke the supermajority in the legislature a couple cycles ago. And what that means is when Governor Cooper vetoes a bad restriction, the legislature is able to uphold that veto. And so we will continue to highlight any place where that happens. And I got to say, because I am a former opposition researcher, we are going to continue to shine a spotlight on what the Republicans are doing. Every time one of them proposes a national abortion ban, every time someone says that, hey, maybe we'll consider contraception as the next step of what we're going to ban, or that it should only be available to married couples, or so on. These are actual things that Republicans have said, and we're going to continue shining a light on that so people know what's truly at stake here.
Can you say a little bit about the states that you will be targeting with this campaign? We've talked about a lot of the battleground, and it's the same 2020 battleground, so it's probably the same states. But can you talk a little bit about what you will be focusing on?
Sure. And what I will say is we've talked about some states. It's not the final list of states, right? As you all know very well, campaigns evolve, things change, and we'll keep looking at that and adding to. We are looking in particular at states where we have Democratic governors that we want to protect, and or have Republican governors we want to flip. We're looking at some of those, obviously keeping the Senate and ideally growing that pro-choice majority, keeping the House. These things are really important. So you all know it's the states that and we'll be looking at those places like Georgia, places like Michigan, places like Arizona. These are places that we'll be looking at, and we'll be building that out as we go.
You know what's amazing about that is when I was looking, so your list is the list that we keep talking about of battlegrounds, right? I mean, but when I was looking at the places where laws are going to be contested, okay, so there's a group of like deep red states where there's going to be immediate trigger laws, right? That really Democrats have little chance of making a difference there, right? But then there's literally like the battleground states for abortion, where if you have a Democratic governor, they can veto the worst of the GOP-led state legislature instincts, where there may be a law on the books, from like 1931, which is the case in Michigan, or the state legislature is on the verge of passing something and will pass more, like in Pennsylvania. So I was looking at those states and I was like, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Georgia, Arizona, Florida, Ohio. Was it Ohio? North Carolina. It wasn't Ohio. It was North Carolina. And I was like, oh my God, like this is the battleground of abortion is literally the battleground states that you guys listed and that we've been talking about this whole time. It's really amazing, the overlap.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And that's part of why we do the work that we do and part of why we're focused on it, because we have seen that one elected official in some cases can stand in the way of truly bad legislation, or in some cases can result in good legislation. We've seen in New Mexico, Emily's List worked hard to make sure that they had a pro-choice majority, because they had a Democratic majority, but it wasn't pro-choice. And so looking at those races, making sure that Jen Jordan wins as Attorney General in Georgia, and was obviously Stacey Abrams, right? Like what a big difference that would make for people in that state. It's the same in Michigan. Virginia is a good example of a place where you can see we lost the governorship and we lost the majority in the House. But that Senate is holding strong. Thank goodness Louise Lucas and the Democratic senators there are holding the line and have ensured that the protections stay where they are. That's the sort of thing where you look, and race by race, we got to pay attention. And I am so grateful because you all have focused on state legislatures for a long time at Daily Kos, and not everyone has, and it's so important. And I hope that everyone watching or listening will go and look, who is my state legislator? What is my state legislature doing? Is there a way I can help? Or we'll plug into other places, because all of it, it's daunting, right? To say all of it matters, but it kind of does. So that's where we are. We're going to try and be in all of those battleground states and look up and down the ballot, because up and down the ballot really matters.
Yeah, no, it's all, everything matters, and every election is the most important election of our lifetime. I mean, that's the truism.
I know.
So, Christina, you saw the clip of Joe Biden, right before you came on, where he was like, I don't want to talk about that just yet. And he was obviously trying to keep the focus on the pocketbook issues. Democrats are so, presumably it matters. But Carrie also makes a really good point that he could have still pivoted on the issue of abortion and made it an economic issue. That's not a hard argument to make. People make it all the time. It's real. Are you worried about what you're hearing from the White House right now, or you think maybe they're just waiting for the official opinion before they really go hard?
Well, I think there's a little of that. I will say this, I thought that that the statement they made the day after the opinion came out, the efforts that they're trying, we know that this will kick things to the states, and it's tough for the administration to do too much, but the fact that they're looking at ways they can do it. And in another fit of interesting timing, we had our annual conference and gala the day after this, and the vice president was scheduled to give welcoming remarks, and instead she gave a bit of a barn burner on abortion rights. And so I believe that this is an administration, and I think, listen, Carrie, I think it was you or someone gave Democrats a C, and we'll take our grades and continue to work harder. But I will say this: I think we should never discount the fact that this is the first administration since it's been a thing to put out a budget without the Hyde Amendment in it. I think that this is, we have made progress, and it's disappointing that that we don't, it's that we're going to have a vote that probably won't go our way in the Senate. But we have passed the Women's Health Protection Act in the House. I think let's flip one more seat. I think, hopefully we're going to, continue to grow that majority in the Senate, and we're going to keep working at it. But I do believe that we have allies in the White House, and I do believe that they are looking at ways to do this. And I think that you will hear it from them. I think today they were offering a different message, and having worked in a Democratic White House, I know sometimes when you work really hard to get to your message, you want to stay on it. So I feel for them on that. But I do think that you're going to hear it. I think we did hear it last week. And I encourage anybody to go back and look at the vice president's speech. She was pretty fired up. I don't know about as fired up as Carrie was a minute ago, but she got close.
Did she mention Ted Cruz?
She did not mention Ted Cruz, but you know what? I think we were okay with that from our stage. So
people are eating, right? So
that's
yeah,
right. Correct. Yes, but no, I think so. I think there's always room, again, I'll quote my boss, LaFonza Butler, our president, who says, we can all talk about this issue more, right? It is important. We can all do it. We can all stand to talk about it more. But I also do think we have allies there, and I think we'll continue to hear it from them.
Yeah. So just to be clear, so my C grade was just on the response since last week. So maybe I'm being a little harsh, partly because you know what, I want to see more.
Sure.
I do think what I do think is that Joe Biden spent that speech saying, look, these guys are fringe. They want to sunset Medicare, and they want to sunset Social Security, and they want to raise taxes on 100 million working Americans, right? And leave the rich people alone, and make sure that they can just keep hoarding all the resources up. And I just thought it was a easy pivot for him to be able to say, that one thing I'll say about abortion is Republicans have a fringe, are on the fringes of this issue, just like they're on the fringes of the economic plan going forward. It's all of a piece, right? And so, I think he could have easily called their position fringe about not wanting people to make their own healthcare decisions, et cetera, and say it's just part of a whole piece about how fringe they are. That. I think that is a message to Americans broadly, is something that's, tying it all up in a package.
I think that's fair. I will confess that I did not get a chance to see the speech, but I will say I think you will hear that more and more. And I think, to my point about the whole voter, they've got problems on all the on all the things we're concerned about, and they are to the they do have extreme positions. They are too far to the right. They are overreaching on issues, and again, I think we're gonna spend some time and spend some resources on making sure people know it.
So there's two sort of groups that we obsess about, Carrie and I, and Daily Kos in general. It's one, obviously, is the base, is motivating and getting out our base. But we also look at the only persuadable demographic, seemingly right now, which is college-educated suburban white women. Do you have data information that would serve that would give us an idea how abortion rights plays with this suburban, white, college-educated demographic that is so critical to winning close elections?
It won't shock you to know that, like the majority of pretty much every group out there, they support this right. They believe that you should get to make the decisions on your own, and that the government / Ted Cruz should not get to do it for you.
Crazy.
And so I know, and this is the thing that it's an interesting. I've heard, and you heard it in the question for Joe Biden. I think some of the media is trying to is playing on the Republican turf, right? Buying into some of their misinformation and the way they try and frame this issue. And the reality is that's not where we are. We are not talking about which degrees, how much do you want to allow? They are trying to get rid of all of it. They are trying to ensure that you can't decide full stop for yourself. And so, and yes, white suburban, suburban women of all races, they are very supportive of this issue. And so, the polling varies, but I will say what we see all, across the board is a majority support our right to make this decision, a majority support Roe, and decent. I'm not talking 52%, right? Like, we are usually in the 70, right? In the 70 range. And so, and that is very true of this group. This group is we hope the gettable group, right? Women, hopefully women voters will save us all.
So this is because, in that draft opinion, Alito basically said, if women don't like it, they can turn out and vote for somebody who will change that.
Damn right.
We agree. Yes.
Right.
Yes, sir. We will do that. Thank you for the invitation. We were coming anyway, or at least now, now we will. So yes, agreed. And I think, we have seen a gender gap. Obviously, white women have let us down in a couple of the previous elections, in some, with regard to Donald Trump and other things. But I think we're going to see this being a motivating issue for women writ large. And I think we should not discount what turnout. You mentioned base, right? Turnout is incredibly important. And I think looking at different groups, AAPI women, Latinas, Black women, and white women, they support this right. And we're going to make sure they know who is ripping it away.
Yeah. I first of all, I searched because this seems like a classic wedge issues to me, right? And boy, does the media love to talk about wedge issues when it's working against Democrats. They, latched on to wedge issues forever during the LGBTQ, equality fight. Right. They were talking, they've been talking about wedge issues against the Democrats for the 90s. So I searched the word wedge a couple days ago just to see if they were bringing it up in this context, because it's a classic wedge issue that could literally wedge some conservative leaning women away from for a cycle, or more, frankly. And the only headline that I saw that had wedge issue was written by, I think, a former Trump spokesperson talking about, and it was using wedge the other way. And I was like, are you kidding me? This is the best the media can do. But but the media is working with this environment of polling that is is so far off the map now, because they keep talking about, Democrats and pro-choice voters, they don't vote on this, they're not animated by it and whatever. And I'm like, none of that matters. None of that polling was done in an atmosphere where we had where rights were literally being taken away. And that's what's happening here. Rights, a constitutional right, is being taken away. Can you talk a little bit about just the difference, and whether or not you're seeing any signs that there are, that the motivation here is different than what it might have been in, past cycles as the media is chatting about.
100%. And I will say, I worked for Hillary Clinton, and I remember watching focus groups, and we I would say we accurately predicted what Donald Trump would do, but if anything, we were probably modest in our expectations for him. But we would talk about, he could appoint Supreme Court justices. He can appoint, all these things. He will take away. He has mentioned, as Republicans are trying to do now, criminalizing abortion and punishing women and punishing doctors, right? These are things that that we would talk about, and they would say, yeah, but I just think, we've got Roe, right? If they mention that, it was that's there, and so we're safe. Or I just don't think it's that at risk. They, for a right that had not been around that long, it was firmly entrenched in voters' heads that that, but we're fine because we have this. And so I do believe this is going to turn. I think, again, we're only a week out, so I don't think we're at a point where we're seeing what it truly means. I am also, as a political hack, and I love opinion research is important, and I love it, and it's great. I think it's always hard when we say this is the thing that got voters out, right? Like, there are many things that get voters, and we need to acknowledge that. But I think that I will say, I can't say which candidates, but we have had some candidates who happen to be, doing focus groups or in the field as this was happening, and boy, does it matter. We are hearing people fired up. And so I believe that we will continue to see in groups and in polling that we will see this issue continue to be an important issue, but also continue to be one that is bad for Republicans and good for Democrats, and that makes people more likely to vote for us and to vote against them. And that's an important thing. I want to say, your point about the media, I think I like to say that I think some of the media came up when I did, when this was considered a third rail issue for Democrats. Yeah. And honestly, it's never actually been one, but Republicans got the high ground, or, whatever analogy you would use there, and convinced everyone that they were on the side of voters. And I think that for some of the media, they haven't changed. I talked to one reporter this week who said, well, aren't you worried about what this is going to do to Republican enthusiasm? And I said, no, I looked at the polling. They won. Right? Like, they should be afraid, right?
Yeah.
We're on the wrong side. And you can look at, it doesn't matter what poll. Fox News, we're winning. NBC News had a poll where they tested a variety of issues of what made you more likely to vote for a Democrat or vote for a Republican. And the news coming out of it, I think, defund was the number one, and so that was the headline. But number 3, in terms of what drove vote, was, do you prefer a candidate who supports, protecting abortion rights, or one who opposes them? And there was another one, and there were big gaps, like 30-point gaps here, between do you support a candidate who will protect Roe v. Wade and one who wants to overturn it. And like the answers it's all there in the polling. So we have to make sure that these guys, I say guys is a gender neutral term, but a lot of them are, but that these Republicans, that their record is clear, that voters understand how we've gotten here. Yes, this is the Supreme Court making the decision, but it has been a concerted and sustained effort, right? And they're gonna push it further. Mitch McConnell, who is a more careful politician than some, acknowledged it this week. So we're gonna keep highlighting that, because if the media is still going to think it's a wedge issue, even if they may not use the word wedge, then we're going to remind them that it is just not the way you think it is.
Yeah, there's a lot of anecdotes, and of course, anecdotes aren't data, so I want to stress that. But anecdotes of candidates that have been, going door to door, knocking on doors, and saying everybody wanted to talk about inflation, and then the last week they've only wanted to talk about abortion. Like, it seems that that's sort of the topic du jour. And I'm curious, do Republicans get any mileage out of saying, "Oh, we're just letting the states decide"? I mean, I know, like you just said, Mitch McConnell has just sort of stepped on that messaging, some fears, by saying, you know what, maybe we'll want a federal law. But leading into this, that was sort of their messaging. We don't want to ban it. We just want the states to decide.
There's
Do people care? Is that a distinction?
Senate Republicans are still trying to sell that. I mean, Ron Johnson saying, "Oh, I think we should let the states decide." This is like nutty Ron Johnson, who's like right winger among right wingers, and he's trying. He's got like 35% approval rating in his state, and he's like, "Oh, I think we just want to let the states decide for now." Like he's trying to moderate. So I mean, Senate Republicans are still there. Mitch McConnell, just to be clear, was forced into saying a federal abortion ban would be possible. But I stand by Marcos's question. Are they getting? Is that?
Well, this is part of why we are, going in with NARAL and Planned Parenthood on a massive campaign, because we're going to do our best not to let that happen. My hope, and we will continue to ask the media to do this, is that these candidates get asked specific. I've watched for years as Democrats have been asked about things that are not real. Right. That, they've been asked about and I'm not going to say it because I don't repeat the ridiculous made up frames, but they've been asked about things that Republicans, try and ban that don't exist. Right. And I've watched that for years. And I certainly hope that Republicans will get pinned down on, and I suspect you'll see it in debates. Right. But certainly by the media on, do you support what the Supreme Court is doing? And should your state pass a ban? Okay, you want to turn it to states? You as a voter in your state, do you want them to pass a ban? Do you want a Texas style ban where there's bounties put out on doctors and Uber drivers and so on? Do you agree with Mississippi Governor Tate Reeves, who said maybe we should think about contraception? I want them to answer all of that. And I will also say that most of them have taken votes, right? And so, again, the former researcher in me wants to believe that matters, and we will highlight those votes. But I think we're going to try and make sure that they don't get away with that, because this has been their plan all along. Right. They knew it. They were aiming for this, and we're not going to let them get away with saying, "Oh no, now it's out of my hands."
Marcos, do you think we should ask? I mean, do you have more questions? I just wondered if we should. Yeah.
This is the end. Actually, we went a little over, so thank you so much, Christine, for taking a little bit extra of your time. This is the point of the show where we ask our guests to let our audience know what they can do to help you do what you do so amazingly well.
Can I name more than one thing?
Please.
Okay.
Absolutely.
All right. Number one, I hope you will support Emily's List. Learn about us. Come support us. We can always use the help. Emily'sList.org. Number two, please find out about the elected officials in your area. And that means not just your senator or your House member. That means all of those, the down ballot statewides, like Attorney General, so important. The state legislators, city council. In some cases, you've got cities trying to ban abortion on their own, which God love them. So please find out about that, and please jump in and help where you can. You would be amazed at how much these candidates need the help, whether it's $5 here and there, or doing a call shift or things like that. Up and down the ballot, they all need the help, and we have got to replace these Republicans. It is our best way to fix the policy moving forward. And there are lots of efforts. Please go out and support. Support the providers, support the funds. They are doing amazing work. But I would also say, please, you have an audience that is online, right, and very vocal on social media. Please correct the misinformation. Please make sure that we are lifting up the positive. I think those of us we get a lot of outrage. I share it. I am now outraged about Ted Cruz, which is not where I thought my day would end. But we share it. Let's make sure we're not sharing disinformation and misinformation. Let's make sure we are, like offering up good facts and good candidates and good actions when we can, because what we know is for a lot of candidates, in particular women, and in particular women of color, they get faced with an onslaught of abuse and disinformation, and what they need is someone to say, hey, you did a good thing here, thank you for this statement, thank you for this. So I would say all of the above, right? The support matters too. We have our outrage and we should share our outrage. Let's not repeat the BS. I won't swear here. I'll stay PG for you.
You can swear.
All right, well, let's not repeat the bullshit, right?
Yes.
But let's call it out, and let's call out the positive as well. And so any and all of those things are incredibly helpful. And call out the media if they get it wrong, because sometimes they are going to get it wrong on this issue, and we know where voters stand. And so help us give them a little pressure. So
that was awesome. That was an amazing list of things to do. And I would add that if you live somewhere near a battleground, if you're in Chicago, you can just hop on over the border into Wisconsin. If you're in New Jersey, New York, you can go to Pennsylvania. If you're in Florida, Georgia, stay home and work hard. but if you're in Alabama, not a lot may be happening locally. You can cross the border. So there's always somebody that needs help. Correct. And would appreciate whatever you're able to offer. So this is an existential fight for a lot of things. Yes. For our very democracy. Now, we've been saying our democracy is at stake, and now, our rights are also at stake. And I do want to add one little thing, because Carrie and I, we've been talking about November elections and the conventional wisdom about how the Democratic base is not as motivated. And we kept bringing up the Supreme Court and Roe, and we didn't see it in the broader media, right, Carrie? Like, it was apparently it's a bunch of male analysts, right, who just couldn't fathom that this bombshell was coming, right? And I think everybody's been disabused of that notion finally, right? Just the reality of this last week. So this is a real right that's at stake, and so it's very important for all of us to do everything possible and definitely support Emily's List and NARAL and Planned Parenthood for the great work that they're doing, as well as your local providers. It's incredibly important. And so, Christina, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Christina Reynolds. She is the Vice President of Communications at Emily's List. Thank you so much. So, Carrie, we have a couple minutes if you wanna sort of sum up some, because you're like you're like vibrating.
I'm like bursting with stuff.
You are vibrating with like all this energy. Like, why could the election be next week, right?
Well, so let me say, first of all, just let me put a finer point on some of the anecdotal information. Both of you talked about how people are, the questions during door knocking is changing and whatever. And I have a very specific example of that, because your friend and my friend Joe Sudbay was interviewing people on Sirius XM Progress, and he talked to a state senator from Washington, I think Senator Randall, and I can't remember her first name, but in any case, she is in a district that's a swing district that she won in 2018 by some 100 votes, right? So it's a legit swing district that she barely won in a very good year for Democrats. And she had been knocking doors since mid-March and said basically all the questions she was getting were pocketbook issues, right? And then the decision came down, and basically every door she knocked on for the past week was all Roe. It was all Roe. And the people were even making the connections and saying things like, I'm concerned about our democracy and whatever. So like that's not polling, that's not quantitative data, but it certainly is qualitative data of like a shift in people's focus based on that leak. And that's just within the first week, right? I think that once we see a lot more stories about this, once the actual opinion drops, once the Republican state legislatures in these, really red states start doing just draconian things, like I think that people are going to start wrapping their minds around what this means for generations to come. So that's one thing. Also, I gave Washington Democrats a C, and I keep on going back to this because Christina mentioned it, and I was like, fair. I was like, whatever. I want more from Washington Democrats, but let me just say, swing state Democrats have been all over this. I mean, if you look at Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer, she immediately said, I'm going to fight like hell on this. I'm going to the Supreme Court, the state Supreme Court. I'm going to ask them to make an immediate ruling on whether our state constitution protects a woman's right to abortion, because there's a law in the books there dating back to the early 1900s that's left over, that's a remnant. But that would be a total abortion ban. You look at Stacey Abrams in Georgia. She paused immediately her fundraising for her campaign, and that's no small thing. She's a fundraising machine. And she said, we're going to divert our resources, our fundraising resources, to the abortion groups, the people who are working to protect the right to choose in our state. I heard Josh Shapiro in Pennsylvania. He's the Democratic AG there, but running for governor. He said, I just want to say that I heard him interviewed, and he said, Republicans are just wildly out of touch with the electorate here on this issue. And I don't hesitate to talk to any voter in any county about this issue because Republicans are so fringe and off the mark on it. So I'm paraphrasing there a little bit, but that's very close to what he was saying. So swing state, even Tim Ryan in Ohio, he put out this ad saying that he was going, that he wasn't going to go all in on culture war issues, that he was going to, he was fighting for Ohioans, and that was what he was going to focus on. And then this decision dropped, and he was like, you know what? I'm pro-choice on this, and all the other guys I'm running against are just completely fringe pro-lifers. So, like the swing state Democrats are all in, and they have been super aggressive.
Yeah. We're going to be talking about this a lot over the next couple of months. It's hard. I have to keep reminding myself it's only been 8 days. And so this is going to reshape the electorate in ways that we really don't know. And it's too early to poll. I mean, we have our own polling firm. It's too early. People are still processing. They're still hearing about it. So it's still too early. So there's a lot to be discovered and said about this issue. And we are going to be tracking it very closely. I do believe very strongly that it does change the vibe, the feeling of being in the minority, which is energizing to a party out of power, or the party out of power always has more energy. I'm starting to get a sense of that, and the complacency of victory on the Republican side. They got what they want. What else is there? They won. Congratulations. So that's our show for today. Thank you, Carrie. As always, thanks to Christina Reynolds. She is the VP of Communications at Emily's List. They're doing great work, emilyslist.org. They're also working with NARAL, Pro-Choice America, and Planned Parenthood Action Fund to pump $150 million to center abortion rights into November's election, which I think is a fantastic effort. I'm really hoping it's supercharged. That $150 million was a conservative estimate given the energy around the issue. I want to thank everybody that makes the show possible. Walter, Kara, Dorothy, Paul, and Carolyn. I'd like to really, really, really thank you, the listener, and the viewer, and the reader, because we also transcribe the podcast. Thank you for being part of this effort to protect our democracy and save our rights. This is, unfortunately, the most important election of our lifetime. It's not hyperbole. It seems to compound every time. You thought it was important last week. Oh, boy, let me tell you about this week. So we need all of you doing everything you can to fight for our country. And so I'm glad to have you guys as fellow travelers in this fight for our democracy. So thank you very much. Catch you all next week.